This is my true story. I raised my son with love, patience, and hard work. I cooked for him, cared for him, and gave him everything I could. I thought respect would come naturally when he grew older. But one evening, when I placed his dinner on the table, he threw the plate on the floor and laughed. My hand shook, but my heart broke more than the plate. I said nothing, but life spoke for me the next morning. Before I tell you what happened, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And please subscribe so my story can reach more people. Every morning, I woke up before sunrise. It had become my habit for years. Even after retirement, I kept the same routine. I liked quiet mornings when the world still slept. The house felt peaceful at that hour. I moved slowly but steady, my back bent, my hands shaky, yet my mind calm. Cooking gave me purpose. It was my way of feeling useful in a home that didn't seem to need me anymore. I went to the small kitchen, turned on the stove, and prepared tea first. I liked to make it strong, just like how I used to drink it when I worked long hours to feed my family. Then I cooked breakfast. Simple things like eggs, bread, and sometimes porridge. I didn't eat much myself. I saved the good portions for my son and daughter-in-law. It made me feel good to serve them. It was the only way left for me to show love. I remembered when my son was small. He used to wake up excited, waiting for me to serve breakfast. He would run to the table, sit with a smile, and talk endlessly about school. Those mornings were full of laughter. Now, things were different. He hardly spoke. He was always in a hurry, always on his phone. The only sound I heard at breakfast was the sound of scrolling and typing. Still, I never complained. Some mornings, my daughter-in-law helped me set the table. She was quiet, but polite. She thanked me sometimes, though her eyes always looked tired. She worked late every night, and I respected that. I wanted to help her, to make her mornings easier. So I cooked for both of them every single day, without fail. I didn't expect thanks. I just wanted peace. I cleaned the kitchen before they woke up. I liked things neat and organized. The house was built with my own hands, and I still cared for it deeply. Even when they treated me like a guest, I kept things running quietly behind the scenes. The dishes, the groceries, the bills, I still helped wherever I could. But lately, I had started to feel invisible. They spoke around me, not to me. When I entered a room, the conversation stopped. When I cooked, they sometimes didn't eat. When I cleaned, they didn't notice. Yet I kept going. Habit was stronger than pride. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because stopping would mean accepting that my place in the home was gone. That morning was no different. I woke up early, made tea, fried eggs, toasted bread, and waited. I set the table carefully, placed everything neatly, and sat down quietly in the corner chair. I listened to the sounds of footsteps upstairs, the same routine, the same silence. But deep down, something felt heavy that day, a quiet tension I couldn't explain. When I heard my son coming down the stairs, I smiled softly, hoping for at least a small greeting. There was none. He walked past me without looking. I didn't take it personally. I was used to it. I poured tea into the cup, pushed the plate forward, and sat quietly, waiting. The room smelled of fresh bread, the sunlight touched the walls, and for a brief moment, it felt peaceful. I didn't know that within seconds, that peace would break, that this small act of love, repeated every morning, would soon turn into the reason for my deepest hurt. I looked at the food on the table and smiled faintly, proud that even in my old age, I could still care for my family. But I didn't know that this morning's breakfast would be remembered for all the wrong reasons. I didn't know that by the end of the day, my son's actions would change everything, not just for me, but for everyone in that house. The kitchen was quiet, except for the sound of the clock on the wall. I stood near the stove, wiping my hands on a towel. The smell of toast and tea filled the air. My son walked in, half awake, holding his phone in one hand. He didn't look up. He sat at the table, scrolling through his messages. I smiled weakly and pushed the plate toward him, hoping he'd eat. He looked down at the plate, eggs, bread, and tea, the same simple meal I had made every morning for years. His face showed no gratitude, no kindness, only irritation. Then, suddenly, he picked up the plate and threw it onto the floor, and told me to eat it from the floor itself. The sound was sharp. The plate shattered, food scattered across the tiles, tea spilling under the table. I froze. My hands trembled. I looked at the floor, at the mess, at the food I had made with love. I couldn't move. My heart felt heavy, not from anger, but from disbelief. He looked down at me with a cold face. Then came a small laugh, quiet, cruel, and cutting. For a few seconds, there was nothing but silence. The sound of the broken plate echoed through the room. My eyes filled with tears, but I turned away quickly. I didn't want him to see. I bent down slowly and began picking up the pieces. My hands shook as I gathered the broken parts. I said nothing. He sat back down and continued scrolling through his phone as if nothing had happened. He didn't offer to help. He didn't apologize. He just drank from his bottle of water. My knees ached, but I kept cleaning. Each shard of glass seemed to press deeper into my heart. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my daughter-in-law standing in the doorway. She had seen everything. Her face was pale, frozen in shock. She didn't speak or move. She just watched me, the old man on his knees, cleaning the mess his own son had made. It was a sight I wished she had never witnessed. When I picked up the last piece of glass, I wiped the floor clean and placed the towel back at the sink. My face showed no anger, no tears, just emptiness. When I was done, I sat down quietly in my small chair by the corner of the kitchen. A moment later, my son stood, grabbed his bag, and walked out. The sound of the door closing echoed through the house. I looked at the empty chair where he had been and whispered softly to myself, though no one could hear. The house grew silent again. My daughter-in-law walked slowly into the kitchen and looked at the floor. There was no sign of food, no sign of the broken plate, only the silence left behind. She looked at me sitting still, staring at nothing. She wanted to speak, but no words came. The rest of the day passed quietly. I didn't eat. I didn't speak. I just sat near the window, lost in thought. From the outside, the house looked peaceful, but inside, something had broken that could never be fixed. The laughter that came from cruelty had left behind a wound no one could see. Not yet, but soon, everyone would feel it. The house was silent after the door closed. The sound of the broken plate still echoed in my mind. I sat on the chair, staring at my hands. The skin on my palms was rough, with small red marks from cleaning the mess. My eyes felt tired. I didn't cry. There were no tears left for that kind of pain. The quiet filled every corner of the room. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed louder than usual. I looked around the kitchen. Everything was clean again, but it didn't feel the same. The floor shined where I had wiped away the tea. The table was empty. The smell of food was gone. Only the faint scent of soap remained. I felt small in that big room, like a shadow in a home that no longer recognized me. I wanted to stand, but my legs felt weak. The memory of his laughter stayed in my ears. It wasn't just the sound. It was what it meant. It was mockery. It was a sign that love had turned into disrespect. The same hands that once held him as a baby had just cleaned the floor after being humiliated by him. That thought hurt the most. From the hallway, I saw my daughter-in-law peeking quietly. She wanted to say something. I could see it in her eyes, but her voice never came. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tight. She didn't understand how cruelty could come so easily. She stepped back, leaning against the wall, her silence heavy. Slowly, I stood up and walked to my room, one hand pressed against the wall for support. My small bed was neatly made, the pillow perfectly placed. I sat down, staring at the old family photo on the table beside the bed. It had been taken years ago, my son smiling, my wife beside me, all of us happy. Back then, love was real, respect was natural. Now, it was just a picture of what once was. I took a deep breath, turned the photo face down, and closed my eyes. My heart felt empty. There was no anger, no wish for revenge, just disappointment. I had spent my life teaching him kindness, honesty, and respect. But somehow, those lessons had disappeared. Maybe comfort had spoiled him. Maybe pride had blinded him. I didn't know. The house remained quiet all evening. He didn't come home for dinner. My daughter-in-law stayed in her room, pretending to sleep. I ate a small piece of bread and drank some water. It didn't taste like anything. I went to bed early, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the plate breaking again. Hours passed. The sound of the clock was the only thing that reminded me time was moving. Around midnight, I heard soft footsteps in the hall. My daughter-in-law walked quietly to the kitchen, maybe for water. She stopped near my door. For a moment, I thought she might knock. But then she turned and walked away. I heard her door close again. Then, silence. In that quiet darkness, I realized something important. Silence could hurt more than shouting. It wasn't the broken plate that hurt me. It was what came after. The quiet, the indifference, the emptiness that filled the house where love used to live. I looked at the ceiling and whispered softly to myself, "This is not my home anymore." It wasn't anger. It was truth. The house I built, the family I raised, had changed. I was no longer the father who was respected. I was just an old man tolerated out of duty. Before finally closing my eyes, I made a promise to myself. I would not cry again. I would not argue. If they wanted distance, I would give it. If they wanted silence, I would live with it. But I wouldn't lose my dignity again. That night, as the house remained still and dark, something inside me hardened. Not bitterness, but resolve. She stood by the doorway, her hand still on the frame. She had seen everything from start to finish. The moment my son threw the plate, the way the food hit the floor, the sound of it breaking, the silence that followed, the sight of me bending down, slowly, carefully, to clean the mess my own son had made. She couldn't move. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her chest felt heavy, her throat tight. She wanted to speak, to tell him to stop, but her voice wouldn't come out. The air in the kitchen felt thick, almost suffocating. Her heart pounded as she watched the man she had married, not just act cruel, but enjoy it. The laugh, that cruel laugh, would stay in her mind for a long time. She had always known he could be harsh, impatient, proud. But this was different. This was cold. There was no reason for what he did, no frustration to blame. It was simply disrespect. She looked at me, my shaking hands picking up pieces of glass, and something inside her broke. She remembered how kind I had been to her since the first day she entered the house. I treated her with respect. I made her tea every morning. I asked if she was comfortable, if she needed anything. I was gentle and patient, even when others weren't. I never raised my voice. I never complained. I was the quiet strength that kept the house running. And now, that same man, me, was being treated like dirt by his own son. She could see the pain in my eyes, though I tried to hide it. My silence wasn't weakness. It was dignity. But that made it even harder to watch, because silence often says more than words ever could. My son didn't look at her after what he did. He walked past her, phone in hand, acting as if nothing had happened. The door slammed, leaving her alone in the room with the smell of broken eggs and spilled tea. She stood there for a long time, staring at the spot on the floor where the plate had shattered. I had already cleaned it, but she could still see it in her mind. She finally walked over to me. I was sitting in the small chair by the window, my hands folded in my lap. My eyes were blank, staring at nothing. She wanted to kneel beside me, to apologize, but she didn't know how. The words felt small, useless. Instead, she stood silently, watching me breathe slowly, each breath heavy with years of love and hurt. As the day passed, she couldn't shake the image from her head. Every time she looked at my son's face, she saw the cruelty he had shown that morning. Every sound in the house, the creak of the floor, the ticking of the clock, felt louder than normal. It was as if the house itself knew something had gone wrong. That night, she lay awake. My son fell asleep easily, as if nothing had happened. But she couldn't close her eyes. The image of my bent back, my quiet tears, kept replaying. She turned her head toward my son and saw a stranger. The man who once promised to take care of her, to build a home of love, had turned into someone she didn't recognize. In the dark, she made up her mind. She couldn't stay in a house where kindness was punished and cruelty was normal. She couldn't share her life with someone who laughed at pain. Respect was more important than comfort. Dignity was more valuable than marriage. She looked at the clock. It was past midnight. Tomorrow, she told herself, she would do what her heart already knew was right. She would leave, not to run away, but to stand for what was right. For the man who had shown her respect when no one else did. For herself. For the kind of life she wanted to live. The rest of the night passed in silence, but inside her, a quiet storm had begun. The night came slowly. The air in the house felt heavy. No one spoke during dinner. My son ate alone in his room. I stayed in my small corner, quiet as always. My daughter-in-law moved through the house like a shadow, doing small chores just to keep herself busy. But her mind wasn't there. Her thoughts were stuck on what she had seen that morning. I sat near the window looking outside. The streetlights flickered. The city noises faded. I could hear the faint sound of the wind. It reminded me of quieter times when this same house was filled with laughter. Back then, my wife was alive. My son used to hug me before bed. Everything had meaning. Now it felt like a place built from walls and nothing else. I didn't cook that night. I didn't want to touch the kitchen. The smell of spilled tea and broken eggs still seemed to hang in the air, even after cleaning. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired. My body felt weak, and my heart felt heavier than ever. I thought about eating something, but the thought of food turned my stomach. So, I sat there, still, silent, waiting for time to pass. Upstairs, my son scrolled through his phone. He laughed at a video, sent messages to friends, and ignored the quiet downstairs. He didn't notice his wife lying awake beside him. She turned her back to him, staring at the wall. Her heart was racing. She wanted to ask him how he could be so calm after what he did, but she didn't bother. She already knew the answer. He didn't care. She turned toward the ceiling, blinking back tears. His breathing grew steady as he fell asleep easily, like nothing had happened. She watched him for a long time, feeling a distance grow between them that words could no longer fix. She realized she wasn't looking at her husband anymore. She was looking at a stranger, someone she didn't recognize. Downstairs, I finally stood and walked to my room. Each step felt slow and painful. I passed by the kitchen and looked at the clean floor. It looked perfect again, but I still saw the image in my mind, my son's hand throwing the plate, the sound of the laugh. I closed my eyes for a moment and shook my head slightly, as if trying to erase it. But some things can't be erased. I lay down on my bed, facing the wall. My stomach growled softly. I ignored it. Hunger didn't bother me anymore. What hurt more was the silence. Not just the silence in the house, but the silence between hearts. I felt like a guest in the home I built. I pulled the blanket over myself and closed my eyes. Sleep didn't come quickly. Every time I drifted off, I saw the same moment again and again. The food falling, the laughter, my hands cleaning the mess. I sighed and turned over, staring at the small clock beside my bed. The minutes passed slowly. Midnight, then 1, then 2. The house was still. Upstairs, my daughter-in-law was still awake. She sat up quietly, careful not to wake my son. She looked around the room, at the clothes, the furniture, the pictures on the wall. Everything looked fine, but it didn't feel like home anymore. She felt trapped in a place filled with comfort, but empty of love. She got out of bed and went to the balcony. The night air was cold, but she didn't care. She stood there, looking down at the quiet street, her mind clear for the first time. She thought about me downstairs, lying alone. She thought about my son's laughter, sharp and cruel. And she thought about herself, about the kind of person she wanted to be. The decision began forming in her heart. Tomorrow would be different. She went back to bed, but she didn't sleep. The sky outside started to change color slowly. The first light of dawn appeared. She looked at my son one last time. He slept peacefully, unaware that everything was about to change. She whispered to herself, "Enough." Then she closed her eyes, waiting for morning to come. Downstairs, I finally drifted into light sleep. My dreams were soft and quiet, memories of when my son was kind. I didn't know that the next sunrise would bring something unexpected, something that would finally speak for me when my voice no longer could. The first light of morning entered the house quietly. The air felt still, heavy, almost waiting. My daughter-in-law was already awake. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ring on her finger. My son was still asleep, breathing slowly, unaware of everything that was about to happen. She looked at him for a few seconds. There was no love in her eyes anymore, only disappointment. She stood up, went to the closet, and took out a small bag. She began packing quietly. Just a few clothes, her documents, and a small photograph of her parents. She didn't need much. She wasn't running away for comfort. She was leaving for peace. Each fold of clothing felt heavy, but her heart grew lighter with every move. Downstairs, I sat in my chair, already awake. I hadn't slept much. I heard footsteps upstairs and assumed it was just another morning. I didn't know what was about to unfold. I poured myself a cup of tea, weak and light, and looked out the window. The world outside looked calm, peaceful. I wished the house could feel the same. She walked slowly down the stairs, holding the small bag. Her eyes met mine. For a moment, we just looked at each other. No words were spoken. I could see the tiredness in her face, the quiet pain behind her calm eyes, and she could see something new in mine, strength, the kind that only comes from making a hard choice. She walked to the kitchen and placed her wedding ring on the table. It made a small sound, but to her, it felt loud. I looked at it, confused. She took a small piece of paper and wrote something on it. Her hand shook a little as she wrote. She placed it beside the ring and stepped back. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She knew this was right. She had made her decision in the quiet hours of the night. She couldn't stay in a home where cruelty was normal. She couldn't live beside a man who had lost respect for his own father. She had seen enough to know that love without respect isn't love at all. Before leaving, she looked at me one last time. She gave me a small nod. It was her way of saying thank you, not just for kindness, but for showing her what true dignity looked like. I nodded back, still silent, my heart heavy, but understanding. She turned and walked toward the door. The morning sun touched her face as she stepped outside. She didn't look back. She didn't take a car or call anyone. She just walked down the road, steady and calm. Every step away from that house felt like freedom. I sat still for a long time. The ring on the table shined in the sunlight. I reached for the note, my hands trembling, and read it slowly. The words were simple. If you can throw away the man who raised you, you can live without me too. I stared at the paper for a long time. The meaning sank deep into me. It wasn't anger in those words. It was truth. It was justice written softly. I folded the note carefully and placed it next to the ring. Then I sighed, a sound that came from years of sadness. Upstairs, my son was still asleep. He didn't know his wife had gone. He didn't know that his laughter from yesterday had cost him everything. The house felt strange now, quiet but not peaceful, empty but not calm. I stood up slowly and went to my room. I sat on the bed and looked at the photo of my family again. The faces smiled back from years ago, innocent and full of love. I placed the photo face down once more and whispered, "It's done." For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel helpless. I felt something close to peace. Life had spoken for me, and it had spoken loud. I didn't need to raise my voice or ask for respect. The truth had done it for me. And in that silence, I finally rested my heart. The morning was quiet, but it didn't feel peaceful. The sunlight came through the curtains, warm and bright, but it couldn't hide the emptiness in the house. My son woke up late, stretching, unaware that everything had changed while he slept. He looked around the room, expecting to see his wife beside him. The bed was empty, the blanket folded neatly. Her side of the wardrobe was open. half empty. He frowned and checked the bathroom. It was clean and dry. No sign of her things, no sound of movement. The strange quiet began to bother him. He walked out of the room and called her name once, then again. No answer. He checked his phone. No new messages. For a moment, he thought maybe she had gone to the market or to visit her parents, but something about the silence felt different this time. Downstairs, I sat in my chair, calm but thoughtful. The ring and the note were still on the table. I didn't touch them again. I knew my son would have to face them himself. I waited quietly, knowing what was coming. The smell of tea filled the kitchen again, but it was faint, weak, almost symbolic. I took small sips and watched the sunlight hit the window. My son came down the stairs quickly. "Dad," he called out, his voice uncertain. I didn't move. He looked around, noticing the bag missing from the hallway, the quietness of the kitchen, the air that felt almost cold. Then he saw the table, the ring, the note. His steps slowed. His heart started to beat faster. He reached for the note with shaking hands. He read it once, then again. The words hit him harder each time. He dropped the paper back onto the table and looked at me, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. I just looked back, silent and steady. There was nothing left to say. Everything was already said. He sat down suddenly, his legs weak. He ran his hands through his hair, staring at the ring. He called his wife's number. It went straight to voicemail. He called again and again. No answer. He checked her social media. Last seen, last post, nothing new. He opened the window and looked out, as if hoping she'd be walking back any second. She wasn't. He called her parents next. No answer. He tried her friends. No reply. His hands began to shake as he kept pressing redial. Each ring that didn't connect felt heavier. His mind went blank. His chest tightened. He didn't realize it yet, but the feeling he had wasn't just panic. It was guilt. I watched quietly. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. There was no joy in seeing my son finally understand pain. It wasn't victory. It was consequence. I had warned him for years with kindness, but kindness had been ignored. Now, life had delivered its own lesson. His phone lit up again. Call failed. He pressed it again and again. Still nothing. He counted the missed calls piling up on the screen. 1, 2, 5, then 10. By noon, there were 19 missed calls, all unanswered. He slumped back in the chair, his head in his hands, breathing hard. He looked at me again. "Did she say anything to you?" he asked weakly. I didn't answer. I just looked down at my teacup and said softly, "Eat your breakfast." That was all. Simple words, heavy with meaning. He looked down at the table where the food used to be yesterday. The memory of him throwing the plate flashed in his head like a knife. He suddenly saw it clearly, how his laughter had sounded that morning, how I had bent down silently to clean. Shame burned in his chest like fire. He wanted to apologize, but the words wouldn't come out. They felt too small now, too late. The house that once felt full now felt like an empty box. The laughter was gone. The warmth was gone. His wife's voice, my quiet patience, all of it gone. Only silence remained. He looked at the phone again, hoping for a message, a call, anything. It didn't come. And in that silence, he finally understood what it felt like to be alone, the same way I had felt when my kindness was thrown away. The phone started ringing again. The sound filled the house, sharp and loud. My son jumped each time it buzzed. He grabbed it quickly, hoping it was his wife. But it wasn't. It was another relative, another friend, another person asking what happened. He didn't answer. He didn't know what to say. The calls kept coming one after another, each one a reminder that something had gone wrong. By noon, there were 19 missed calls, all from different people, some from her family, some from friends. He scrolled through the list again and again, hoping one of them would give him a clue. But no message came. No one told him where she was. The silence on the other side of the phone felt heavier than any words could. He sat on the couch, staring at the screen. His throat was dry, his hands shaking. The guilt was starting to take shape in his mind. He replayed everything: the breakfast, the plate, the laugh, the look on my face, the silence that followed. It all came back like a wave that wouldn't stop. For the first time, he felt what I must have felt: small, powerless, and alone. He stood up and looked around the house. It felt cold. The curtains were still open, sunlight flooding the room, but it didn't feel warm anymore. It felt empty. Even the walls seemed to echo with the sound of yesterday's mistake. He tried to shake the feeling off, but it stayed with him, following him from room to room. He walked into the kitchen. The smell of tea still lingered faintly. The note was gone. I had folded it and kept it safely. The ring still sat on the table, shining quietly. He reached for it, but stopped halfway. He couldn't touch it. It didn't belong to him anymore. It was a symbol of what he had lost: love, respect, and trust. I came into the room slowly, walking with my cane. My son turned, expecting anger or disappointment, but my face was calm. There were no tears, no yelling, just quiet eyes that had seen too much pain already. I didn't ask what he was doing. I didn't say, "I told you so." I just walked past him and started making tea again. He wanted to speak. The words stayed in his throat. "I'm sorry." Felt too small now. "Please forgive me." Sounded weak. There was no way to fix what was broken. He watched me pour the tea, steady and patient, as if nothing had happened. But the silence between us said everything. His phone buzzed again. He jumped, hoping it was her. It wasn't. Another friend. Another missed chance to fix something. He let it ring. Then it stopped. Then started again. The sound filled the quiet room. I didn't look up. I kept stirring my cup slowly. He finally sat down, his hands covering his face. He stayed like that for a long time. He thought about calling my name, about saying something, anything, but he couldn't. Every time he opened his mouth, the sound of his own laughter from yesterday stopped him. It echoed in his mind, cruel and unforgiving. I finished my tea and left the room. He was alone again. Alone with the noise of his phone, the empty kitchen, the ring on the table, and the silence of a father who had already said all he needed to say, not with words, but with distance. By evening, my son's phone was full of missed calls, 19. He scrolled through them again, slower this time. Each one reminded him that his actions had consequences, that cruelty always finds a way to return. When the phone stopped ringing completely, he looked at it one last time, then he placed it face down on the table. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, full of regret. He looked around the house that once felt like his home. It didn't feel like one anymore. It was just a place filled with walls and mistakes. He finally understood that the laughter that hurts others always finds its way back. And when it does, it doesn't make a sound. It just leaves you alone with the silence you created. The evening came slowly. The sun began to set, covering the house in a dull orange light. My son sat alone on the couch, still holding his phone. The screen was black, no new calls, no messages. He stared at it, waiting for something that would never come. His throat was dry, and his heart felt heavy. It wasn't anger anymore. It was fear. It was regret. He looked around the house. It was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that makes a person face themselves. He saw the empty chair where his wife used to sit, laughing softly during dinner. He saw the corner where I used to sit every morning, sipping tea with a gentle smile. Both chairs were empty now, one because of his cruelty, the other because of his pride. He had turned love into emptiness with his own hands. He stood up and walked to the kitchen. The air smelled faintly of soap and old tea. The table was clean, but the memory of what happened there still burned in his mind. He could see it clearly, the food on the floor, my quiet face, his own laughter. That laugh now felt like a knife twisting inside him. He wanted to take it back. He wanted to go back in time, stop himself, and apologize. But time doesn't wait for anyone. He went to my room. The door was half open. Inside, the bed was neatly made, the blanket folded, the window slightly open, the air still. But I was not there. The room felt colder than before. He looked at the small table beside the bed. The photo of our family was missing. That one small detail broke him completely. It meant I had taken it with me. He sat down on the edge of the bed, holding his head in his hands. His heart pounded fast. "What did I do?" he whispered softly. But there was no one to answer. The question floated in the air, unanswered and heavy. He had spent so much time trying to prove he was strong that he forgot what real strength was: kindness, respect, patience. I had all of it. He had none. He stood up and went back to the living room. The ring was still on the table. The note was gone, but he didn't need it anymore. The words were burned into his memory forever. He walked toward the window and looked outside. The sky was dark now. Streetlights flickered, just like they had when I used to wait for him to come home late. Back then, I stayed awake until I heard the door open. Now, I was gone, and he didn't even know where. He picked up his phone again. He dialed my number. It rang once, then stopped. He tried again. No answer. He tried a third time. Nothing. He left a message, his voice shaking. "Dad, I'm sorry. Please come home." The words sounded weak, almost meaningless, but it was all he had. He hung up and waited. The phone stayed silent. The minutes turned into hours. Still no response. He realized then that I wasn't ignoring him out of anger. I was done waiting to be treated right. I had finally chosen peace over pain. And that was when the truth hit him. Respect lost is not easily given back. Once it's gone, love loses its voice. He walked through the empty house again. Every corner reminded him of something he had taken for granted. The smell of morning tea, the sound of my slow footsteps, the warmth of his wife's laughter. All gone. All because of one cruel moment. He sat down on the floor where the plate had broken yesterday. His hands touched the same tiles. He could almost feel the small cracks where the pieces had fallen. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, tears came. Quiet, steady tears. Not for pity, but for truth. He had thrown away food, but what he really threw away was love. And when love leaves, it doesn't come back easily. He looked at the phone again, still hoping for a call. It didn't ring. It wouldn't ring. He had learned his lesson too late. Days passed slowly after that morning. The house stayed quiet. My son didn't leave, didn't eat much, didn't speak to anyone. His phone stayed close to him all the time. He checked it every few minutes, hoping for a message, a call, a sign from his wife, or from me. But the screen stayed empty. The silence grew heavier with each day. I never came back. I packed a few clothes, took my savings, and left with the help of a kind neighbor. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't need to. I only wanted peace. After years of giving love and being hurt, I finally chose a quiet life where no one could laugh at my pain again. The neighbor said I found a small room in a peaceful area near the temple. I lived simply. I cooked for myself, read the newspaper every morning, and greeted people with a soft smile. I didn't talk about my son. When people asked if I had family, I only said, "Not anymore." Back at the big house, my son started to see what loneliness really felt like. The rooms that once felt full now echoed. The laughter he once took for granted was gone. The smell of breakfast never came again. The sound of his wife's footsteps, the quiet hum of my prayers, all gone. Only silence remained. Every morning, he sat at the same table where I used to serve food. He made himself tea, but it never tasted right. He burned the toast every time. He tried to remember how I used to make it, but he couldn't. He realized he had never paid attention. He never cared enough to learn. That truth hurt the most. At night, he looked through old photos on his phone, pictures of family gatherings, birthdays and holidays. I always stood at the back, smiling quietly, never demanding attention. He never noticed how happy I looked just being with them. Now he noticed everything. Too late. His wife's parents refused to talk to him. Her number stayed blocked. No one told him where she went. He left messages every day, long ones, short ones, desperate ones, but she never replied. He even drove to her parents' house once. They didn't open the door. He waited outside for hours, then left when he realized waiting wouldn't fix anything. The weight of guilt began to change him. He stopped going out with friends. He stopped laughing. Even work felt meaningless. He would sit at his desk, but get nothing done. The memory of that morning replayed every day. He saw the plate falling. He heard the sound. He saw my hands cleaning the floor. Every detail burned inside him like fire that wouldn't go out. One evening, he sat on the floor, right where the plate had broken. The tiles still had small marks, tiny scratches that no one else would notice. He ran his fingers over them. They felt like scars. He realized that even when things are cleaned and fixed, some marks never go away. He picked up his phone again and looked at the contact list. My name was still there. He couldn't delete it. He couldn't call it either. He just stared at it. The longer he looked, the more he understood that forgiveness is not something you can demand. It's something you have to earn, and sometimes you never get the chance. The night grew quiet. He turned off the lights and sat in the dark. The silence filled the room completely. He thought about all the times I had called him to eat, to talk, to share a moment, and how many times he had said, "Later." Now there would be no later. He looked around at everything he owned, the big house, the car, the clothes. None of it felt important anymore. Respect and love were the only real things, and he had lost both. The next morning, he opened the window and looked outside. The sky was clear, the world calm. But inside, everything felt broken. He whispered quietly, "I'm sorry." There was no one to hear it, but he said it anyway, because sometimes saying it is all that's left. And from that day on, he never laughed at anyone's pain again, because he finally knew, once you break love, no amount of regret can bring it back.